The Charles Manson case is a crime story of America. This is one of the most chilling and disturbing crime stories in modern history, the case of Charles Manson, a man who never personally committed the murders, yet controlled minds so deeply that others killed for him without hesitation. Welcome to this deep dive into the Charles Manson case, a story of manipulation, cult psychology, brutal murders, and a legacy that still haunts America today. Early life. Charles Manson was born on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His early life was anything but stable. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was just 16 years old when she gave birth to him. She struggled with alcohol and crime, and Manson grew up in an environment filled with neglect. At one point, his mother was even imprisoned for robbery, leaving Manson in the care of relatives and state institutions. From a very young age, he experienced rejection, instability, and exposure to criminal behavior. By his teenage years, Manson had already begun a life of crime, stealing cars, burglary, and running away. He spent much of his youth in reform schools and juvenile detention centers, where he reportedly faced abuse and developed manipulative tendencies. Chapter 2: Prison Years and Transformation, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Manson spent much of his early adulthood in prison. Ironically, prison is where he began shaping the persona that would later make him infamous. While incarcerated, he studied religion, philosophy, and even learned how to play the guitar. He became fascinated with the power of influence and control. He also read books on Scientology and psychology, which reportedly helped him understand how to manipulate people. By the time he was released in 1967, Manson had transformed into a charismatic and persuasive individual. Formation of the Manson family. After his release, Manson moved to San Francisco. During the height of the 1960s, counterculture movement, a time filled with hippies, free love, and rebellion against authority. It was here that he began attracting followers, mostly young women. He offered them a sense of belonging, love, and purpose, things many of them were missing in their lives. This group became known as the Manson Family. Manson used drugs, especially LSD, along with psychological manipulation to control his followers. He positioned himself as a spiritual leader, even convincing some that he was a messiah-like figure. He isolated his followers from society and slowly took complete control over their thoughts and actions. The helter-skelter theory. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Manson case was his belief in what he called helter-skelter. Manson interpreted songs from the Beatles' White Album as hidden messages predicting an apocalyptic race war in America. He believed that this war would lead to chaos, and that he and his followers would rise to power afterward. But Manson didn't want to wait for this war to happen. He decided to start it himself. His plan was simple yet horrifying: commit brutal murders and make them appear racially motivated, hoping it would ignite nationwide violence. The Tate murders. On the night of August 8, 1969, Manson sent members of his cult to a house in Los Angeles. The house belonged to actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time. That night, Sharon Tate and 4 others were brutally murdered by Manson's followers. The killings were savage and shocking. Victims were stabbed multiple times, and the word pig was written in blood on the walls. Manson himself did not carry out the murders, but he orchestrated them. The LaBianca murders. The very next night, August 9, 1969, Manson escalated his plan. This time, he accompanied his followers to the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. After tying up the victims, Manson left. But his followers stayed behind and murdered the couple in another gruesome attack. Again, messages were written in blood, attempting to make the crimes appear politically and racially motivated. Arrest and investigation. Initially, police struggled to connect the murders, but eventually, a breakthrough came when members of the Manson family were arrested for unrelated crimes. One of the followers confessed, revealing the truth behind the murders. Charles Manson and several of his followers were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. The trial of Charles Manson became one of the most famous in American history. Manson behaved bizarrely in court, carving an X into his forehead and later turning it into a swastika. His followers showed extreme loyalty, even shaving their heads and mimicking his behavior, despite never physically committing the murders. Prosecutors argued that Manson was the mastermind behind everything. In 1971, Charles Manson was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to death, but the sentence was later changed to life imprisonment when California temporarily abolished the death penalty. Legacy. Charles Manson spent the rest of his life in prison until his death in 2017. The Manson case shocked the world, not just because of the brutality of the crimes, but because of the psychological control he had over his followers. It raised deep questions about cults, manipulation, and how vulnerable individuals can be influenced to commit unimaginable acts. Even today, the name Charles Manson remains a symbol of evil, control, and one of the darkest chapters in criminal history.